for the royal appointment. This is one of those very special episodes where there will be no quips about Transylvania or accents. In fact, I want to issue a trigger warning. If you've had a difficult time over the conversation around King Charles's visit to Kenya, this might not be the video for you. Because what did I see when I opened my inbox? The king cannot apologize to the Commonwealth. Surprisingly, the royal family's era of never complain, never explain is over. But first, she starts off with a little both sidesism. She discusses some of the comments on her recent article about the diplomatic minefield of the royal tour. They range from people thinking that this was a taxpayer-funded jolly, to the king was wrong to express regret over the Mau Mau uprising during a speech on Tuesday night. What? Yikes, but that also is what happens when a majority of your audience is older and whiter and conservative. Camilla mentions in this speech that King Charles stopped short of an apology. And then she writes, quote, "The question that really interests me is, should the royal family be apologizing at all?" Yes, I think they should be. Very, very much so. Considering the way the Telegraph showed that they felt about this 10 years ago, I am not surprised that Camilla Tominey is framing it this way. I'm also not surprised that a woman who has not been able to see her own racism in the past is unable to see the humanity in Black people and think they are deserving of more. Let's talk briefly about the way Camilla Tominey was probably schooled in actual school. What I'm about to share comes from Akala and Afua Hirsch. They are both Black British writers. What they drive home, especially in Akala's Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire, is how Britons are taught about the abolishment of slavery. Obviously, it was a white man who grew a conscience and took down the entire institution of slavery. Except it's not. In Afua Hirsch's book, British, Trinidadian writer C.L.R. James put it, "Those who see in abolition the gradually awakening conscience of mankind should spend a few minutes asking themselves why it is man's conscience, which had slept peacefully for so many centuries, should awake just at the time that men began to see the unprofitableness of slavery as a method of production." Slavery didn't end because white people grew a conscience. In the case of decolonialization, historians don't actually have access to all the information. This is from Akala's book Natives, and this is because the British state embarked upon a systemic process of destroying the evidence of its crimes, codenamed Operation Legacy. Going on, the state intelligence agencies and the Foreign Office conspired to literally burn, bury at sea, or hide vast amounts of documents containing potentially sensitive details of things done in the colonies under British rule, going all the way back to 1662. The only reason we know about this operation is because of a 2011 court case launched by Kenyans against the British for treatment during the Mau Mau revolt. In many ways, it's impossible to write a full-fledged history of British colonialization. But why is Camilla Tominey so dead set to give the benefit of the doubt to the British royal family? That was rhetorical. Back to the newsletter. Camilla goes on to say that clearly there's a growing number of Commonwealth realms, of which the king is head of state, that expect the monarchy to not only acknowledge the mistakes of the past, but stump up compensation for them. Absolute horror. Wherever would they find the money for that? Probably wherever it's all hidden, because we don't actually have a good grasp on their finances because there's no transparency. This part broke me, and I know that's saying something in this article. Quote, "This prevents the royal family with a tricky balancing act as they try to improve relations with Commonwealth countries teetering on the brink of republicanism, whilst also needing to remain apolitical and impartial on such thorny issues as colonialism and slavery." Remain apolitical and impartial on colonialism and slavery. Focusing on the impartial comment, how can they be impartial to something that they participated in and profited on for 270 years? How can they be impartial when it comes to colonization? How can the British be impartial when it comes to colonization? She's creating an excuse, a permission structure for the British royal family. She's also providing a dog whistle to white conservatives who will read this and say, everyone makes such a big deal of slavery. It happened a long time ago. It has nothing to do with them. They're always trying to bring that up because it's woke, woke, woke. Thorny issues. Camilla goes on to say that while Never Complain, Never Explain worked for Queen Elizabeth II, the king isn't as popular as his mother. But, Camilla goes on, if they say too much, they threaten to open a can of worms that could have major implications for the British government. I think one of the ways someone could interpret this is, if we give money to Black and brown people that we hurt in the past but continue to hurt because these problems do not exist in a vacuum and we today see the effects of slavery and generational trauma. But if we give away money, how are Tories going to focus on cutting funding to the NHS and hurting poor people. Money doesn't grow on trees, unless it's the USA's military budget, but I digress. She ends with a lovely whataboutism argument. Feed me a logical fallacy. Quote, since the history of slavery is complicated, I mean, yes, but probably not in the way you're talking about. In parentheses, many have questioned why the British must apologize, but not Arab nations who also enslave people, or indeed the West African chiefs who made money selling their own people. He literally did black people sold slaves. Nothing about this absolves the fact that the British were one of the top offenders when it comes to enslaving individuals and then using them in land that they conquered and colonized. Let's talk about that age-old adage learned in school according to Akala and his book Natives about the fact that Africans sold their own people. An issue and a display of ignorance, to be honest, is the idea that there is an African identity that is not fraught with contradictions and conflicts as it was back then, as it is now. Quote, Africa had and has ethnic, cultural, class, and imperial rivalries that every scholar of the period acknowledges are the very divisions that colonizers and slave traders played on. It goes on to say that the victims of the transatlantic traffic did not think that they were being sold out by their black brothers and sisters any more than the Irish thought that their white brothers and sisters from England were deliberately starving them to death during the famine. It takes so little to see through this, but she is writing to an audience who want to have their beliefs confirmed. She ends with, the royal family's current stance of expressing sorrow and regret rather than issuing a full mea culpa is arguably the best approach to keep white conservatives happy and to not provide any actual change. Here's the thing, if you're just expressing sorrow and regret without any action, without any change, you're really not actually sorry. And so maybe to that degree, it is the best approach because at least they're being honest with how much they care.